No one knows death like death itself. I remember the day I died. Everything was warm, bright, and cheery. I'm honestly not sure what happened. It was too fast. But let me start from the beginning. I was walking down the hall of the hospital where I worked. Nothing at all was out of the ordinary. Just the same old walk, to the same old car, going to the same old home. I wasn't even expecting a thing. There we go, foreshadowing. Well, obviously there wasn't anything out of the ordinary about this night, except for the fact that it was a few degrees colder than most nights. And again, that happens. There's nothing to worry about. But it was emptier, and I felt like something was waiting for me, for who knows what. Being foolish, I didn't pay attention to it. In fact, I was lollygagging in the car garage, only because I was bored. But that boredom cost me my life, because just then, I saw something from the corner of my eye, and it vanished. No, not ran away. It vanished. I was creeped out, but I didn't worry about it, because I'd be at my car in a few minutes. I started walking faster, just as a precaution. I got closer and closer to the big, beautiful thing. But just before I touched the driver's side handle, I got spun around and stabbed. The culprit, wearing a black mask and black clothes, was repeatedly stabbing me. Agony and pain filled my head, and I could think of nothing but to cry out because of the excruciating pain I was feeling. There was more than that, though. The killer, the vibe of him, seemed almost bloodthirsty. Yup, there was no way I would survive this. I tried to think of happy thoughts while I felt myself slipping away. He was still stabbing me, and I could feel it, but it hurt less and less. Soon I felt nothing, and all I saw was blackness. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, that was only the beginning. In the blackness, I felt myself going down like I was in an invisible elevator. Something told me that was supposed to happen, so I didn't freak out. I didn't realize my eyes got adjusted to the dark until the elevator stopped at a really bright white hallway. I was greeted by a man. He looked Indian, Hispanic, and slightly German. He gave me a warm smile and casually told me I was dead, but I knew that already. He asked me, giggling, if I knew what had happened to me. I told him about the stabbing, and he immediately stopped laughing. He escorted me to a room that was completely white, with one chair in the middle. He told me to sit down, so I did. I waited there for at least a half hour until someone came in. He seemed really chill, with a beanie on his head, a growing beard, a mustache, and baggy clothes. He had dreadlocks and was smoking a blunt. It was so strong I could smell it from a yard away. He appeared to be a Caucasian. He spoke. His voice sounded further away than it actually was. I'm the manager of the dead, MOD for short. Now I heard that you know exactly how you died. The laws of death, also the laws of physics, say that's impossible. We need to do something about this very quickly. It will not only destroy you, but the concept of death itself. I will have some scientists do some experiments on you. Something dangerous is going on here. We will meet again. With that, the MOD walked out, trailing his marijuana smoke with him. 5 minutes later, a pair of old Doc Brown-looking men came in, with lab coats, and things I didn't even recognize. They checked me out, from my ghostly feet, to my hair, to my rectum. Needless to say, they got me naked and touched every single inch of my body. I don't even know what to call it, since I can see it, but it's not really there. When the doc duo were done violating me, they walked out, and I sat in my chair. Again. Once I had my clothes on. The MOD came in a few minutes later. I followed him to a secret room that he accessed by placing his hand on the wall, and spoke a password, cannot repeat, for confidential purposes, and let me in. Apparently, I would be staying here overnight. It looked exactly like a prison cell, except all there was a bed. Well, more like wooden boards on table legs. He closed the door and I was all alone. I couldn't leave. The time flew by in what felt like 5 minutes. I closed my eyes and opened them again to the MOD standing over me with a new blunt in his mouth. He got me up and led me to the elevator that I came in earlier. He pressed the secret button and the elevator went down. I was in complete darkness. While descending, he told me that was headquarters and judgment gets carried out there. He told me he had to take me somewhere that I wouldn't like. I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't tell me. The elevator stopped. In front of me, I saw a dimly lit room that looked something like a horror movie, and torture weapons that completely covered the walls and ceiling. Every torture device you could think of. I was getting a bit nervous. But that wasn't the worst part. All of a sudden, a grotesquely ugly man walked into the room. He had a knife going through his neck, with blood constantly spilling. He had a big butcher knife lodged in his head. Spikes and tons of different nails were popping out of his eyes, head, and arms. When he moved, I heard a ruckus of rusty metal scraping together. I could even see his half-rotted skin moving over the metal objects in his body. His nose was abnormally large, and his mouth, his mouth. His lips were cracked and bleeding, and there were nails coming out of some of his teeth. All the teeth were blackish, rotting, and had holes in them. His clothes were extremely tattered, and he was bigger than a bear. His breath smelled like rotten meat, and he smelled like he hadn't showered in months. The elevator door opened, and this Neanderthal pulled me out. I tried to run back to the elevator, but the door had closed, and I watched the MOD rise again. I looked back at this mongrel of a man. He lifted me up and tossed me into a chair that had appeared out of nowhere. I was immediately strapped in with iron shackles, with no chance of getting out. I had no clue what was to happen to me. A television sprung out of nowhere, and MOD's face popped up. While he was talking to, I guess, me, I was thinking, he was using really big words, but I'm smart enough to break it down. Basically, I was about to get tortured. Apparently, it was nothing personal. He just wanted to save the living realm by having me undergo certain treatments in order to forget how I died. I mean, the process started already. I can't remember what my killer was wearing or what he used to kill me. But I was certain that even if I told him I was starting to forget, he would still torture me. So I sarcastically went along with this Bogart's show of smiling and laughing as he showed me a torture device and then demonstrating how it works in the air. It took about 2 hours to go halfway around the room. I could tell he was starting to get impatient, and I was getting bored. So I screamed at him to start already, and he pulled out a massively long sword. It looked like he could barely hold the thing, it was that long. Immediately, I regretted my decision. He brought the sword down to my stomach. I immediately groaned in pain. I had no idea death hurts this much. It seemed like that wasn't enough, so he pulled it out and pushed my fingers and toes in place while he installed some nutcrackers around them. He pushed a button controlling the nutcrackers. Each and every one's mouth closed excruciatingly hard and tight on my fingers and toes, until all I could do was scream as loud as I could. I felt hot tears streaming down my face. If this was agony to me, I'd hate to see the rest of the weapons. My fingers were crushed, but this nightmare didn't end there. Bogart pressed another button which made all the nutcrackers move away from each other, still holding my fingers and toes. Slowly, my sublimbs were pulled off, creating a sickening wet crunch as bones and tendons and muscles and flesh ripped apart, until I was left with nothing but painful, bloody stumps protruding from my shaking palms. Suddenly, there was a disruption in the elevator that Bogart and I could hear. He raced to the door while I was still strapped in. The whole room changed to complete darkness. The elevator stopped and the door opened. All I could hear was choking, gasping, and coughing. Was the occasional slice or stab. Then someone choking on some liquid. Finally, silence. Bogart changed the room to its original shape, size, and color. In the light, I could finally see the unfortunate victim of Bogart. It was M.O.D. I looked at Bogart in shock, and he looked back at me in fear. He rushed over to one side of the room and took a potion. He gave it to me. I drank it hesitantly, and immediately my fingers grew back and the hole in my stomach was healed. It was extremely painful, but it was over in a minute. I got up and walked over to the elevator, where the almost unidentifiable corpse lay. The television came back, and M.O.D. looked really pissed. He explained that since he was up there, he's now in oblivion. Not death, but oblivion. He yelled at us for a bit, mainly Bogart, that he is no longer M.O.D. and that there's no one to fill in. Bogart tried to explain in a menacingly deep and unintelligent voice that he didn't know who came down. M.O.D. couldn't hear him, and therefore rambled on. Eventually, Bogart just gave up and turned the TV off. At this point, I couldn't remember what my killer looked like, so I was getting happy. Bogart beckoned me to join him in the elevator. I warily did so. I didn't know what was going on, so I was kind of nervous. It took a few seconds to get to the first floor. What I saw on the first floor astonished me to the core. Everyone was being attacked by blackish demonic things. They're savagely ripping everyone apart and tossing them aside. Everything was in chaos. What was completely white was now almost covered in deep red. Then I did something. I thought nothing. I looked at the demons. They were getting slower. It was getting hard to move for them. I shouted, "I don't remember how I died." In that instant, there was a flash. Only I could see what happened in the flash. A big, bright portal-looking thing opened up. It sucked all the demons and cleaned up all the mess. Everyone who was sent to oblivion, including M.O.D., came back to this floor. The process took about 2 minutes. Then the lights went back to normal. Everyone stood up, looked around for a minute, then stared at me. Everyone cheered. While the cheering celebration went on, M.O.D. came up to me. "You saved us all," he said. "Whatever I can do to repay you, I'll do it." I thought and thought. I finally figured out what I wanted. Life. And so I told him that. I woke up, 17 knife wounds in my chest, and my wife standing over my hospital bed. "I know what death is like," I said.